Scotland, in the years around 1935 and 1936, was a country in which ordinary life was built on small things. The warmth of a family home, the familiarity of a neighborhood, the daily routines of people who had known the same streets and the same faces for as long as they could remember. Life in Scottish towns and cities in those years asked hard work of everyone in it. Men went to the factories, the docks, the shipyards, the small trades. Women managed the home with great care. Children grew up in close communities where the street was an extension of the living room, and the neighbours on either side were as well known as members of the family. Scotland, in those years, had a particular closeness to it. Communities that looked after one another, that knew each other's business and each other's struggles, and that expected people to lean on each other when times were difficult. The bonds between neighbours, between families, between friends were the structures that held daily life together. They were taken seriously. They were meant to last. It was into this Scotland that Harry Falconer was born, in approximately 1935 or 1936. His full name was Henry Falconer, though he was known to everyone around him as Harry. He grew up in Dundee, Scotland's fourth largest city, sitting on the northern bank of the Firth of Tay on the east coast, a city that had built its identity over generations around jute, journalism, and a certain proud, plain-spoken character that Dundonians carried with them through everything life asked of them. Harry's childhood was marked by a loss that would shape the rest of his life. His mother died when he was just 8 years old. His sister Sarah, who was older than Harry and who would later give evidence about him at his trial, watched what that loss did to her brother. Sarah later told the court he had developed a serious drink problem. He had begun drinking in a way that was not social or occasional, but compulsive, a way that spoke of something deeper than a taste for alcohol, something closer to an effort to escape a pain that had never been properly addressed or healed. It was a pattern that would define the rest of Harry Falconer's life. And it was one that began with the death of his mother when he was still a small boy. Despite the difficulties of his upbringing, Harry built a life for himself in Dundee. He worked as a self-employed salesman, earning his living on his own terms, out on the road, relying on his own effort and his ability to deal with people. He married a woman named Isabella. Together they had 4 children and lived in a 3-bedroom council house on Macklepine Road in the St. Mary's area of Dundee, a residential neighbourhood of the city, the kind of street where families raised their children and got on with the business of ordinary life. Harry and Isabella had a dog. The family kept the dog's dish on the carpet in the kitchen, directly over a hatch in the floorboards that gave access to the foundations of the house. Harry's relationship with alcohol never resolved itself. If anything, it worsened as the years went on. He drank heavily and consistently. He also took Mandrax tablets, a sedative that was widely prescribed in Britain through the 1960s and into the 70s. And when he mixed them with alcohol, the effects were devastating. His 12-year-old daughter, Joyce, later described what life had been like in the house. Her father, she said, was drunk nearly all the time. When he took the Mandrax tablets while drunk, she said, they made him worse, and he imagined all sorts of things. Gold padlocks on the door, snakes crawling all over him. On occasions, he would collapse on the kitchen floor, and Isabella would try to lift him to a chair or put him to bed. She had done that many times over the years. On occasions, Harry hit Isabella. he hit Joyce too. The family doctor, Dr. Alexander Murray, had been treating the Falconers for years. He described Harry as a hopeless alcoholic who had, in his professional view, a death wish, what he called a desire for immediate oblivion. Taking drink and drugs in the way Harry did was, in Dr. Murray's words, a repeating process until death caught up with you. He said Harry couldn't care less whether he lived or died. The doctor also spoke about what Isabella had endured. He said her whole life had been putting up with trouble. Harry had been admitted to hospital on significant occasions for alcoholism and drug addiction. He had discharged himself against medical advice more than once. The pattern was always the same: a period of hospitalization, a discharge, a return to the drinking. John Dury, a senior inspector with the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, had been officially involved with the Falconer family since 1964, nearly a decade before Harry disappeared, monitoring the welfare of the children in that household. Dundee, in the early 1970s, was a city in transition. The jute industry that had defined the city for over a century was in its final decline. The mills that had once employed tens of thousands of Dundonians were closing, and the communities built around them were adjusting to a new reality. The city was changing in character, growing in some directions and contracting in others, carrying the weight of its industrial past alongside the uncertain shape of its future. For families like the Falconers, living in a council house on McAlpine Road, the politics of Dundee's industrial transformation were distant from the immediate and daily realities of life. The rent, the children, the meal on the table, and the question of whether Harry would be sober enough that evening to leave everyone in peace. The last confirmed sighting of Harry Falconer alive was between Christmas and the New Year, between Christmas Day 1972 and Hogmanay, the 31st of December 1972. After that, Harry was simply no longer seen. He was not reported missing. Life in the house on McAlpine Road continued. The children went to school. Isabella went about her days. The dog's dish sat on the kitchen carpet over the hatch in the floorboards. On the 29th of January 1974, more than a year after Harry had last been seen, 2 electricians from the Dundee Public Works Department arrived at the council house on McAlpine Road to carry out rewiring work. Their names were Albert Fraser and Maxwell Patterson. They worked through the morning, completing the rewiring upstairs. When they came to take a lunch break, Albert Fraser had reached the stage of the job that required access to the foundations of the house. As Fraser prepared to open the hatch in the kitchen floor, Isabella Falconer said she was going out to the shops. She left. Fraser lowered an inspection lamp through the hatch and down into the space beneath the kitchen floor. The lamp illuminated what was below. He saw a body. At first, he said later, he thought it might be a dummy. Then he saw feet. Then he was sure it was a body. He and Patterson raised the alarm immediately. Police arrived. Isabella came back and was met at the door by a constable named P.C. James Marshall, who told her the house had been seized by police because they had discovered what they believed was a body. P.C. Marshall later told the court that she did not appear to be upset in any way. What the police found beneath the kitchen floor of the house on McAlpine Road was a grim discovery. Harry Falconer's body was lying approximately 7 feet below the kitchen floor, directly under the hatch, dressed in a shirt, braces, belt, trousers, and socks. The hatch through which he had fallen or been placed had been covered with linoleum tiles, a carpet, and furniture, the carpet being the same one on which the dog's dish had been kept. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition. There was heavy infestation by small black flies and maggot cases. The hands were extensively decomposed and skeletonized. The back of the trunk and the limbs were in a state of mummification. The police surgeon, Dr. Donald Rushton, gave his professional assessment. He thought Harry had probably been alive when he went into the hatch. He believed Harry could have survived under the floor for up to 10 days, though it was more likely to have been a few hours. The cause of death was recorded as unknown. Advanced decomposition had prevented any definitive determination. What Dr. Rushton was clear about was that Harry had been seriously intoxicated by drugs close to the time of death, and that this intoxication would have been greatly compounded if alcohol had also been taken. Isabella Falconer, aged 37, was charged with the murder of her husband. She denied the charges. It was alleged that she had dragged Harry's unconscious body to the hatch in the kitchen floor and dropped him in after he had fallen into a drug and drink-fueled stupor. It was further alleged that she had then deprived him of food and drink and covered the hatch with linoleum, carpet, and furniture. John Dury, the cruelty inspector who had been involved with the family since 1964, gave significant evidence. He said that Isabella had admitted to him that she had dumped the body down the hatch, but that she did not know whether Harry was dead or alive when he went in. The trial opened at Dundee High Court in May 1974 before a jury of 8 men and 7 women. What unfolded over the course of it was unlike almost any other murder trial. Witness after witness, relatives, doctors, officials, painted a portrait of Harry Falconer that built sympathy not for the victim, but for the accused. Every account of Harry's behavior told the same story: the habitual drunkenness, the Mandrax tablets, the hallucinations, the violence toward his wife and his daughter, the hospitalizations, the discharges against medical advice. The family doctor said Mrs. Falconer's whole life had been putting up with trouble. He said he did not think she was emotionally capable of putting him down the hatch and leaving him there. Harry's daughter Joyce, 12 years old, wept uncontrollably as she gave her evidence. Her account of life in that house, of a father drunk nearly all the time, of her mother trying to lift him from the floor, of the violence, was among the most affecting testimony of the trial. The prosecution decided not to continue. The advocate depute, Donald Macaulay, told the court that the case against Mrs. Falconer could not be corroborated with the evidence available to prove that she was guilty. Lord Stott, the judge, addressed the jury directly. He said, "In a situation such as this, there could be no means of knowing for any of us whether the man was dead or alive when he came into the hatch, and you can only murder a living person, not a dead one." He ordered the jury to find Mrs. Falconer not guilty. Before leaving the bench, Lord Stott described the case as a strange and mysterious matter. Isabella Falconer left the court swiftly through a side exit and was driven away in a waiting car. She was in tears. Alexander McGregor, who was then chief reporter for the Courier in Dundee and who covered the trial, later wrote about the case in his book The Law Killers. He described it as unique among all the murder trials he had attended. He said the prosecution case had built up considerable sympathy for the accused and none for the victim, which was extremely unusual. He said every piece of evidence pointed to the miserable life Mrs. Falconer had been forced to endure. He believed that if the case had ever reached the jury, they would have acquitted her, but that the jury having to decide had always seemed unlikely. He said it seemed to him that the Crown had felt obliged to take the case to court, but that having presented all the circumstances, and particularly the life Mrs. Falconer had led, justice was served by ending the trial when they did. Police Scotland has confirmed that the case of Harry Falconer has never been closed. The cause of his death remains officially recorded as unknown. Whether he was alive or dead when he went through that hatch in the kitchen floor on McAlpine Road has never been established. Hello everyone, thank you for listening and drop any feedback below. I would love to hear your thoughts and hope to see you again right here on Cold Case UK.